My name's Derek Bridges. I am part of the Enterprise Applications Group with the state of Ohio, working for our CIO at the Department of Administrative Services. And we're going to talk to you a little bit this morning about what we've done in the state of Ohio in, I'll lay the groundwork generally, talk a little bit about our evolution in the BI space, and then really as we've progressed into visualizations and analytics, how Tableau came into play, and particularly how we've deployed this as an enterprise service across our state agencies. So we are, just by way of background, from an IT standpoint, a fairly centralized state. So our central IT in the Department of Administrative Services serves 120 state agencies, 55,000 employees, and so we have gone to great lengths over the past few years to develop and deploy enterprise services in order to realize economies and improve standardization, things like that. So that's really going to be the focus of our discussion this morning. And then as we get into more of the specifics of how Tableau was deployed and how this service is moving forward, I'm going to ask Payal to come up. She is our BI lead for my team, and she's going to talk a little bit about the specifics. But I wanted to start off by just talking about where we began this, particularly in the BI space, and our evolution and how we progressively got to higher end analytics and visualizations. So just to lay the groundwork, over the last 5-6 years, the state of Ohio has been focused on repositioning its spend from the behind-the-scenes infrastructure and other types of necessary components. My slides are jumping on me here, sorry. To things that are facing the public or that directly benefit the public, which has shifted a lot of spend from the infrastructure space into enterprise applications. And so within this climate, we're focusing on, within enterprise apps, a service model. So deploying these things as services to state agencies. And what you're looking at here is kind of our progression at a macro level from the, give me one moment, where slides are jumping here. So this is basically our progression from custom into more of a service-oriented or a service-driven model. So as we're doing this, we're looking at services in different, from different perspectives. In some cases, we're looking at software as a service, platform as a service, these kinds of commercially offered services. In other cases, we're looking at deploying enterprise services from our enterprise applications or infrastructure groups for consumption by state agencies. So as we do this, we're looking at, there are certain types of functions that we feel are best positioned as, we just buy it commercially as a service packaged. Other things are more of on-prem installs, and Tableau would be an example of that, right? Where we have an on-prem install enterprise server installation of Tableau that we then offer out as a rated service to our state agencies. And that's going to be a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, is how we took this enterprise investment, created a rating model for it and a chargeback model, and deploy it across state agencies. So talking about our BI evolution. So I came over when basically there was not much of a BI practice. This was probably 2010-ish, I think, if memory serves me correctly, and was pulled in to help build a enterprise BI practice at the state. There was really no Tableau on the radar at that point in time. We were looking at really overhauling a structured data warehouse, primarily focused initially around our ERP, and then evolving out from there. And we did an assessment, looked at the situation, and the state determined basically that we needed a full overhaul. And this overhaul basically, we were looking at the modeled data warehouse, we were looking at the BI tools, and we were looking at our deployment model, our change management, and really the rollout approach to this. So we'll get into that more in a moment, but as we did this, we've evolved along kind of a continuum of needs of our users, so to speak, which has gotten us to this point today where, strategically, as we look at our objectives, trying to support state agencies with enterprise solutions. I touched on this. This is, we're realizing tremendous efficiencies, and we're getting a lot of value out of the standardization because we're creating user communities and things like this across different functions. So that evolution, when we started out in 2010, I remember very vividly, we were all very excited about BI, and we were out doing road shows, talking with state agencies and telling them how great all this was going to be. And we're going in enthusiastic about business intelligence and talking about great dashboards and here are all these cool things you're going to be able to do. And generally speaking, the response that we got from people was, that's all really cool, but what I could really use right now is a list of purchase orders. It was very elementary, the initial needs. And it makes sense, right? If you don't have your basic needs met, you're not really worried about high-end visualizations. There was a lot of growth that had to happen before we could get into that type of work. So over the course of the last few years, we've continued to invest in growing that practice out. Generally speaking, using more structured enterprise data sets, so enterprise data assets, our ERP, and some of the other things that span all agencies. And as we did that, people got their basic needs met and started to progress into, okay, now I've got that, I want to do something else. And as all this was happening, we started to see emerging needs for, okay, this is great, I can see a picture of our enterprise data, but I need to start hooking enterprise data into my specific agency or program-specific data sets. And that started to become a often recurring theme. So every time we talk to these folks, in other words, we had kind of, to an extent, exhausted what we could do with our enterprise data. We could continue to make prettier pictures and things like that, but it wasn't very compelling to folks. They really needed to get into either hooking in their data with enterprise data or their data with other agencies' data, which has classically been a problem for the state. Trying to connect data sets across state agencies has been problematic. It's fairly siloed. So as we're progressing, what we're looking at up this hierarchy, right, is just moving up into more of a, directly citizen, public-facing, actionable insights and understandings out of data instead of the very basic transactional and operational reporting where we started. So this is another way to look at this journey, where we started and where we've gone and where we're going. And it poses, the introduction of Tableau and the way Tableau works into this roadmap really presented us with some interesting questions that we had to answer. So, and I say that to say, basically, when we started in 2009, 2010, it was really the Wild West around our data warehouse, and we ended up having to largely tear it down, rebuild it, but more importantly, the state implemented a business intelligence shared council, a governance group that spanned and represented state agencies across the different domains in the data warehouse, and started to add some rigor to what was in there, right? So basically there was very low confidence early on in the data warehouse. People weren't sure how to get what they needed, if they were finding the right data, et cetera. So the first thing we did was put that governance in place and start to grow those standards and that rigor, getting the proper metadata and reporting, data dictionaries and all these kinds of things around the data, the data themselves. So as we progressed, up into more operational and tactic to strategic use of data, what poses an interesting question and opportunity for us is, as we started looking at Tableau, it is different than most BI tools, right? So what we had begun to run into was, with success came more demand. And so state agencies were coming to us saying, we need you to do this, this, and this, and our queue was just getting too long. And we basically didn't have, the money, or couldn't really justify continuing to grow the team to keep up with that demand. So we shifted the thought a little bit and said, well, what can we do to put a little more capability into the agency's hands, to decentralize this and get it out to users so that we're not a bottleneck when people need things done. Along came Tableau. And we started looking at how the tool worked, and we said, okay, this looks good, so we can federate this out, we can decentralize to an extent, and we can put this in the hands of the users. That's great, but what's it going to do to data governance? And that was one of the things that we were concerned about, is how do we keep this stuff, how do we keep from having a proliferation of misused data, or dirty data, misunderstood data? And that's where we started to develop this model for what Pyle's going to talk to you about, which is basically an enterprise server model with a governance structure around it, then allowing agencies to go out from desktops and run their things through appropriate governance, et cetera. So we got to that point we were starting to answer these questions. Okay, how is this going to work? How are we going to pay for it? Are we going to invest in this centrally? And I'm sure you guys, this comes as no surprise how this usually works. When we first started looking at this, we started going to state agencies. Hey, we understand you guys like this tool. If we're going to buy into this, can we do it cooperatively? Can people cough up money? And all of a sudden, the room fell silent. So we basically looked at it and said, okay, the need is definitely there, and I'm pretty sure that if the service is in place, folks are going to use it. So we made the upfront investment to stand up this central service, the server and everything around it. And I think so far that's been very successful. We've had agencies jumping on board pretty quickly and are actually starting to queue up in that department as well. So Pyle will get a little bit more into the details of how all that's been unfolding. So the needs, when we talk about recognition that we would benefit from an enterprise model like this, the needs were, we had gotten, like I said, we had kind of drained the traditional BI around most of our data sources, right? Everybody had the basic standard reports that they needed. They were all being emailed around, and people were doing who knows what with them. But we didn't really have a practice in place for the interactive, on-click kind of visualizations to tell stories with the data. We were generating good quality reports, but we didn't have a very good way to turn that into a compelling story. And so that's where we started looking at Tableau. And specifically, we were looking at it around two use cases that really jumped out at us. The first one was data discovery. So, and I kind of, the way I usually convey this is having a central BI team, there was always a lot of work that went into modeling, right? And in order to do the modeling, we had to do a lot of just basic data discovery, rifling through data, figuring out, is it clean? Do we need to, what do we need to do to manipulate this to get it ready for consumption? Do we understand what we have? Do other people understand what we have? So as we started, we used to have to do this through whatever means necessary. And as we started playing around with Tableau, what we found was there was actually a very good case here for how this tool could help us with data discovery. And I got it hands-on, personally, playing just because I wanted to try out the tool. I started playing around with data sets and manipulating things and said, wow, this is actually pretty helpful. And as we started talking to state agencies about this first use case, a lot of light bulbs went off, and folks were of a similar mindset that this could be very helpful for us in just understanding what we've got. So generally speaking, it's a very fast, convenient way for them to get started. The second use case here is data visualization, which is really the wheelhouse of what we're using this for. And that would be for visualizing and telling stories internally as well as externally. Now the interesting thing about external is that's been perhaps one of the largest demands that we've seen from our state agencies. And Payal will show you some examples of these, particularly one we did with our state budget office. And what we found is as soon as we put this thing online, so we hooked up an API to our budget office website, embedded Tableau within their site, as soon as we did this and people started to see, okay, that's how that works, we started to get a lot of new inquiries about it, a lot of new demand, and folks are gearing up very quickly to figure out what they're going to put online. So making data more available for ultimately the citizens of the state, our constituents. Similarly, and agencies are falling on both sides. They're doing internal and external. Internally, we've found all kinds of fascinating cases, and it's really been entertaining for us because we're learning things about our state agencies that we didn't know they did. Things that are parts of their mission where we're kind of, wow, I didn't know you did that. And there are some fascinating cases that have come along around, I think our Ohio EPA was doing something around manure spills, which, it's useful. So we came up with a lot of very interesting cases around this, and people are starting to marry their programmatic data up with enterprise data assets, and better still, they're starting to reach across state agencies, which is a very encouraging thing. We've been trying to break down those walls, little by little to encourage that data sharing, and I think that the visualizations that this tool is providing is a compelling reason for people to start doing that. So with that, I'm going to transition this to Payal, and she's going to talk about how the enterprise service, as I kind of set that stage, how this enterprise service actually emerged, how we set it up, how it operates, and what it consists of. So thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Good morning, everyone. I'm Payal Thakur. I belong to the same team, and just continuing the presentation, I do want to talk about how we evolved. So basically, when we started, we had the product, and we knew what it did, and we wanted to start agencies, have them come over and tell us if this is good enough for them. And the feedback we got was, yes, this is great, but they needed a lot of hand-holding, a lot of help. And just like any enterprise service, we evolved and we learned as we grew that we need to provide a holistic approach, and we need to also provide advisory, hosting, enterprise data, training, and support around the model. And that's how our model is structured today. We are growing, so this might change to improve, but this is what we have as of today, and I'll talk about the details on the next slides. So our approach to advisory has been basically broken down into content structure and how we onboard. So agencies, as Derek mentioned, some of you missed that since you guys came a little later, we have around 110 agencies that we are trying to focus on. Now understand their different needs are different. Some might be very mature, some might be very elementary. So we are working with them, we are going to them, trying to make them understand how this all works. And we believe they know their data best, just like any other agency. And we want to give them the option of self-service, as you can see on the left, where we can give them a site and have them experiment their dashboards, build their prototypes. So usually it's the business people who build these prototypes and then push it on to the IT section of their agency. And it's a partnership that they're working with. and try to see if that works for their agency. Now, if they do need that extra help, then our team is always there to help them, and that's where you see on the right side where the BI team works with the agencies to get them ahead in terms of if they're lacking some skill sets within their agency, or whether this is a more complex project for their agency. So we're very flexible and we're very open to those kind of adjustments, but that's how we're structured today. And in either case, the state offers full onboarding services and support, and that's what you see at the bottom there, is where we build and deploy their sites. And I'll show you in a little bit how we are structured in terms of the site. Okay, so this is our approach to hosting and enterprise data. Each agency that we onboard gets their separate space. And the big benefit to this is agencies really like how their data is secured, they can control it, they like that others don't have visibility to it. As Derek had mentioned, they are siloed, but there are also times where the agencies have mentioned interest like ODOTs and PUCOs, which is the Ohio Department of Transportation and Public Safety, where they want to collaborate on certain common data interests. And that's where our team comes into play, and we have the enterprise site in the middle, as you can see. That's where we are trying to get the agencies to collaborate, share their data, and then we are responsible at that point to make sure that the data is accurate. And we're working with a lot of other agencies like GIS, ERP. All our ERP data is also going to be there for all the agencies to use. And but again, this model has worked efficiently so far because agencies get what they want, both internally and externally. And moving along to the next slide is this is our approach for training and support. So I do want to mention that when we started initially, we did have some challenges around training. But what we realized is as soon as we put in the state data in there, it was very relevant to all the state agencies. And that's what our approach has been. We are going to have those sorts of trainings where we have the relevant data. And we also have developed, we work closely with BISC, as Derek had mentioned earlier. It's the Business Intelligence Shared Council, which represents all the agencies throughout the state. That gives us an insight into what they are looking for. And as we continue to grow. And we do have the Central BI Help Desk to support any of the cases as they're onboarding or the agencies have questions. And believe me, there are a lot of questions every day. Simple things like which version should we use and things like that. We are trying to come up with newer ideas to address all of that so there's more, everything is more streamlined. And one thing I do want to mention is a lot of our CIOs and CFOs have been very supportive, and they continue to provide us the feedback. And we have a lot of councils throughout the state where they participate, and they give us kind of heads up as to what their agencies are looking for and how this tool can help. And that's been very collaborative and useful for us as a state. And moving along to the next slide, the state collectively works to leverage cost benefits, and through this enterprise cost model that we have worked out for BI, we are trying to make sure that they get the best in terms of not just the desktop licenses rate, but also in terms of the Tableau server, which we have purchased. The intent there was to make it seamless for the agencies to onboard. So they're not worried about licensing, server patching, upgrading, and things like that. And they can concentrate more on their content and what they need in their business realms and not worry so much about the IT part and the server part. So that's where we take care of those things for them. But they do have to purchase their desktops because each agency is different. Some might need 5, some might need 50. So we leave that up to them. And then they work through the STS, the state term contracts, and avail those desktops. And then once they are ready with their prototypes and they've developed those dashboards, then they publish up to our server. And stop me if you have any questions, but at the end we'll have enough time for questions as well. So I'm very excited to talk about this example, which Derek had mentioned earlier. It's the Ohio Interactive Budget. It is the first of its kind. It's comprehensive. It's a state financial public-facing website, so it's external. It's open to all citizens and open to all visitors. I would highly encourage you guys to take a look and provide feedback. It is where you can quickly search through the state accounting system. It's transparent, provides a lot of revenues, expenses, vendor information, trending, and you can see some cool analytics that we used. And as you can see in the middle, all of that is where the software Tableau is used. And the wrapper around it, like Dirk had mentioned, is that the state budget website, which controls it through the API. And it's received a lot of positive feedback, but again, this was our first attempt to kind of use Tableau and see what kind of feedback we get. And again, it's a great tool for all citizens, especially for the state of Ohio. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, this is a great example of self-service analytics. EPA actually, almost within a week of when we had their site deployed, they were able to go and use a lot of their dashboards, dashboarding skills. Now these people who developed were all the way from business users to IT managers who had never seen Tableau before, never used it, but they were able to quickly use a lot of their cases. They have a requirement, and I'm going to try to put this in the right context. So newspapers must publish notifications within 12 days of receiving their order. So basically, EPA sends out these notifications to the newspapers, and they have to do that within 12 days. As you can see, they've done a really good job here, where they can see how compliant they are on the top left. On the top right, you can see they had a process improvement in place and how that has dramatically reduced the number of days, and they can actually see how much improvements they've made. On the left side, they are not just looking at all the orders, but they are looking by program, and by each of those, how they're able to see which one's doing how well and which one's actionable, which one they need to escalate, and it's been a really great tool for them. So that's one of the examples. Now they did do this manually, but they had little visibility into all of this. Now with everything being on one dashboard, it makes it very easy for them to see where they're lacking, where they can grow, and what are the points that they need to take action on. So the next example is actually something we do internally. This fine example tracks overall cases. Visually, it's very in the sense that you can actually see a lot of the different applications that we are tracking internally. And it was a cumbersome process initially, a lot of emails and Excels and other forms of data that we had to track, but this is no more fragmented. It's in one place, and we're able to see. Again, this is just one of the many dashboards that are internally being used by our leadership to improve and track system performance, efficiencies, processes, and all of these things support the state of Ohio's centralized services, which includes the finance, the human resources, the portal, the CRM, and as you can see, ELM. So these are the different things that go within the centralized service. There are a few others that are not on here, and like I mentioned, there's a few other dashboards that are very useful for our leadership internally that we are still evolving and growing and trying to make them better. But again, these are some things that have quickly helped us to track and kind of keep our services streamlined. And moving along to the next slide. All right, I think I am almost to the end. Okay, on the closing thoughts, we have a couple of things that Derek wanted to talk about. And Derek, if you may step in. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thanks.
So, before jumping into the closing thoughts, I want to hit for 1 second, I want to back up for a minute. And so this one, I can't help myself, and we're doing fairly well on time, so I wanted to back up to this. This slide was kind of referred to as Derek's dashboard, because what we're looking at here is basically a service management dashboard for a lot of the applications that are in my group's portfolio. A lot of that is ERP, so you can see financial and HCM systems and things like this. So we have a CRM system and an IT service management system that tracks work, service, looks at queues and flows. And this is, I like this one, and believe that it is a interesting case to highlight because of how it came about. So when we bought this tool, I was actually, we had something had happened. It's been a while back, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but we had kind of a rough week operationally. I had been blindsided by a couple things, system issues, things that I didn't see coming. I didn't have very, very good visibility into it, and so the week ended on kind of a rough note. Things got resolved, but I was kind of left scratching my head. Okay, how did that happen? How did we not see this coming? So on Saturday afternoon, I just jerked a bunch of the data out of our CRM system and started playing around with, okay, what can we possibly see here? And about 4 hours or so later, I pretty much had a framework for how I'd like to see these things at a very summary level, how I want to look at and understand our operations, our service management, where we have, where we're having issues, where we have work queues, these kinds of things, because that all feeds how we allocate resources. So do I need to position people over here? Do I need to focus over here, et cetera? And, and I'm sure that the actual hands-on experts on our BI team lament this, but, I can develop to a certain point and go, okay, this is conceptually what I want, and toss it to them, and I'm sure they have to unwind half of what I've done and build it all back up from scratch. But it was a very, very streamlined process for us, more so than the typical, starting with written requirements gathering and documenting and develop. This really allows us agility to develop these things on the fly. I could basically sit down and literally I downloaded the trial, the 14-day trial, and started working there. So I didn't really have any training or anything coming into this, but I did have the advantage of knowing the data. So it kind of speaks to that model of getting the tool in the hands of the people who know the data best. So in that case, I was data guy, not IT guy. I was business guy, not IT guy. And I was able to conceptually throw together, here's basically what I want. And you can see, like, top left, obviously, looking, and this isn't a polished, finished product, but the point is, if you look up here at the priority, I've got 29 high priority financial cases sitting at greater than 90 days aging, which says, uh-oh, right? So this was basically a direct reflection of how I see our operations. And it was a very cool thing for us to be able to take this, not a finished concept, but something that left the team no doubt as to where I wanted to see this go, right? So it's a direct reflection of how I see our operations. Now this has grown into, this is just one screenshot of it, this has grown into a multi-layered kind of work in progress where we're continuing to add things in around all of our service level management across our portfolio of services, as well as system and operating metrics. And we're about to start cracking into actually getting application and infrastructure monitoring data fed in there so that we can begin to see these correlations of, around if I'm seeing a bunch of incidents emerging in one category, well, what's driving them? I may be able to trace that back to infrastructure. I may be able to trace that back to underlying application issues. It really presents us with a great opportunity to or rather more visibility into our operations. So I wanted to highlight that one just a little bit further because that's something that has been of immediate tangible benefit to me. And it's kind of I like to use it as a very, personal example of what we can do here. So with that, just to summarize, what we've tried to do here is, and this is this is really our standard approach in IT services, is we take a tool that fits a need that we have across the state. But rather than just deploying tools and kind of leaving people to their own devices, what we've tried to do, we want to encourage adoption and really foster enablement across agencies. So we go to great lengths to put a wrapper around a tool set. So to take what is at its core a tool and put a wrapper around it and turn it into an enterprise service. So a service consisting of the technological tools as well as the change management, enablement, training, support, and ultimately a strategy and roadmap forward such that our agencies have to worry less about those things, right? So the picture that Pyle showed you earlier kind of depicts how this is organized, right? So we stand up the enterprise server, the Tableau server. We take care of any upgrades, patching, admin, all of those kinds of things, right? We also provide the agencies support. We have a quick start program that gets folks off and running, puts some guardrails in place, some best practices. Here's what we want you to do from a governance standpoint. And where we run into, where they come back and ask for help a lot of the time is around data connections and some of the more technical underpinnings of using the Tableau server. But what we've tried to do is work this balance of how do we put in place the standards and the support and the governance that keeps things from regressing back into the Wild West that we had in 2010, back at the beginning of this thing. How do we do that without making ourselves a bottleneck or stifling the creativity and the development of the folks who know the data best, right? And increasingly, as we started looking at non-enterprise data sets, it became very inefficient in the old world because we didn't know their data. So first they had to explain everything to us. We had to try to understand it as best we could. Now we've kind of flipped that. So what we're doing is saying, look, it's easier for me to teach you Tableau than for you to teach me how your organization works, how your data is arranged, and how all your different data sets interrelate. Not even close. It's much easier for us to go out, give them the guardrails, and teach them how to use this tool. So striking that balance has been and will remain a very important, success factor in all this. What we're trying to do is keep the agencies from having to focus on IT upgrades and rollouts and standing up governance structures and all the other things that we can do one time and then repeat out over and over and over, and allow them to focus more on driving value within their organizations, serving the mission of their agencies, and in the case of BI, delivering the insights and visualizations that their folks need. We're realizing efficiencies in doing this, obviously. Rather than having people stand up multiple servers, deploy multiple BI tools, having an enterprise standard allows us to do this very cost effectively. Now the interesting note, and I was talking to some of the Tableau guys yesterday, kind of joking with them, that they came along at the perfect time for us. It was actually very advantageous that we started talking when we did, because we had the benefit, when we're talking about the cost model on this thing, we have the benefit of an enterprise chargeback mechanism, which means for my portfolio of services, we have the ability to levy a rate across state agencies based on a fairly simple cost model. And round about the time we were seeing this emerging need, we had also realized some efficiencies on the operational side of the house across all applications that had freed up some money. So basically cost savings allowed some money to be reinvested back into the service lines. So we had money on hand, we had, the timing was right, the need was there, and things actually aligned very well. So we were able to leverage the existing cost model. We didn't have to change a thing, we didn't have to up the rates, we didn't have to do any of that to stand up this server. Then we just negotiated the contract for desktops across state agencies. So when state agencies come, the great thing is, for anybody who's been around government at all, procurement is not a simple thing. So rather than state agencies having to go negotiate this on their own, get through all the approval processes, or even worse, to have to come and buy through me, I didn't want to be the procurement bottleneck on all this. So what we have is something that works very well. We have an existing contract, we publicize, here's the contract number, this is your unit price, here's what you need. So when they come to us and say we want to stand up a server and I'm going to have 20 people on desktop, we say, there you go, here's your site. Now, do you want the full, we can really carry you into this thing, or we can just toss you the keys and you can take off and run on your site. As far as the desktop goes, just start the procurement process. This is the contract. You don't need to talk to us about it. We all understand how this works. So it's been, that has helped us in quick starting these agencies, having those mechanisms in place. Then ultimately, the last point here that we as a team continue to remind ourselves is, and it was funny, I was asked in a discussion yesterday, how we define success. When do we say we were successful? When do we say we've won? And I don't have a good answer for that. A part of me says, as long as we keep up with evolving technology, with evolving needs, then maybe we're successful. Because I don't see us getting to a point where we go, okay, great, we've accomplished our objectives, we're good. The things just move too fast. And back to that kind of, that hierarchy of agency needs, every time you peel away or every time you satisfy one need with any users, right, you get them a basic, their list reports. Then they move on to the next thing, right? And so it happens again and again and again. And their needs become more and more complex and more interesting as we go. And so both the technology trajectory as well as the exponential increase in the complexity of what our customers are trying to do really, it presents a challenge for us just to continue to be flexible and adaptable and to grow, change, and adapt to meet the needs of our customers. So with that, let me say thank you. I appreciate you guys coming today. And if anyone has any questions, we are here. We've got a good 15 minutes left to go. So please, in the back.
So in your model, you have one. In your model, you have one enterprise Tableau server with however many workers or nodes, and then you have this. I'm trying to say. I'm saying a statement, but I think it's a question.
Mm-hmm.
You have one enterprise statewide Tableau server setup, and then if an agency wants to onboard, you set them up with a site, a separate site that's just theirs. Okay,
that's correct.
That's
yes.
the model you're okay. And then if there's a data set that is, the agencies that have their individual data sets, but if you have a shared data set, how do you share that data set across the sites? I mean, because it's not, at least
it doesn't.
It
right?
doesn't.
So,
yeah.
yeah. So this was an interesting question, and it's something that I've talked to the Tableau guys about a lot this week. And we're playing around with different concepts for how to do this. And so basically what we have is an enterprise site where, and you are correct, we've got the server, and within the server there are all these different sites. There is an enterprise site where we take data sets known to be enterprise assets. We used GIS, so geospatial kinds of things, as one of the examples of those. Open data sources, right? If we're going to get things from data.gov, census things, those kinds of data sources, that we know to have universal applicability, we'll expose those through the enterprise site. But to your point, what happens when agency A and agency B get together and say, we want to share a data source? We've been evaluating different approaches. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about is site proliferation. So I don't want to see, we've got 100 different organizations that could theoretically get on board with this, and I don't want to have to see administration of 100+ sites on this site. But at the same time, we had to go down this route of giving them their separate sites so that they had the proper controls in place, right? Because agencies look at this and say, hey, if I'm going to put data on my site, data sets that are governed by standards, regulations, be it HIPAA, IRS 1075, all the different privacy regulations, I need to be sure about what I'm doing, right? Because these people are ultimately responsible for the care of that data. So we said, okay, we have to do separate sites, and technically, you are correct, there is no way that we are aware of to share across those sites within Tableau. So what we're looking at doing is actually deploying a data catalog underneath Tableau as a way to address that. So we've planned it out. We'll probably be starting in the next month or so to deploy this, but it's basically a data lake kind of concept with catalog management across the top. And the vision here is that it'll enable agencies to do kind of a knock and answer data sharing model. So agency A and B want to share data. If agency A comes and knocks through this catalog, then agency B can say, yep, you're okay, you're good to go. If they need to do onboarding, fill out, sign away, sign on the line for HIPAA exposure, take training, whatever the case may be, they can handle their onboarding and keep us out of it, right? Because I don't want to have to be the surrogate data owner for all of these things. And that's kind of why we like this decentralized model. So it allows us to federate that out. And if we can pull this off and get this knock and answer kind of sharing, it keeps us, again, from, recurring theme, keeps us from being that bottleneck. So then we would share a layer below Tableau and allow then two different sites could consume the same data set. That's where we're headed right now. Time will tell, but that's the direction. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about the impact of this on data quality? Can you talk about the impact of this on data quality and what happens when agency A discovers some quality issues with agency B's data, or agency A and B say, you know what, it would be better for all of us if we all did this way in all of our data sets. Can you describe a little how the governance process works and
Sure. I'll caveat this up front by saying we are in the early stages of this, and it's an interesting question because a number of us within our central IT organization, from our CIO down, have kind of theorized for a while that when at the top of the conversation I mentioned that it's been a challenge to break down these walls between agencies and encourage data sharing. And there are those of us that have kind of theorized that part of that may be folks are concerned about the quality of their data, right? So I don't really want to open up and show, if I don't really understand the data myself, or if I know the data to be dirty, that may be part of the reason that there's a little bit of a reluctance. Now, generally speaking, I think our governance model has primarily been organized around enterprise data assets. And we have had a number of cases over the last few years where, state agencies are arguing, debating how enterprise data assets should be used, right? And our Business Intelligence Shared Council has been instrumental in that. There is a 7-person voting panel on the BI Shared Council that pretty much has final say on how we define and how we interpret enterprise data assets. Now, to your question of what if it's not an enterprise asset? What if it's agency A and agency B, and they're sharing data sets and there's some sort of disagreement as to interpretation, application of data, time is going to tell there, because there's really no place for us as a central, data BI shared council data governance group to go in and adjudicate that. It's really going to have to come to those two agencies and who's got the expertise and where they can see eye to eye. And I don't know that I've got a perfect answer there. I think that's just going to be something that we're going to have to, work with as it comes. Now, the encouraging thing is, in a lot of cases, these agencies have been sharing data for a long time and have this stuff worked out. In a lot of cases, so I mentioned the challenges, so I'll point out the encouraging thing. There are a lot of agencies that, without anyone's intervention, have seen the synergies in what they do. Agency A and Agency B realize that sharing their data benefits them both. But they haven't had a good mechanism to do it, right? And so people are emailing things back and forth, handing off flash drives, doing who knows what else. I shudder to think of other mechanisms that they could have been using for collaboration. And so hopefully this tool, particularly with this data catalog underneath, will formalize that process, right? And what we're going to have to figure out is how do we as a central agency, as a central service provider, facilitate that governance? And really, what is our role in it? Because I don't feel comfortable sitting between two agencies who have all the expertise on a data set and saying, no, it sounds to me like Agency A is right. It's just not going to work. So, we're going to have to take that one as it comes. I do not have a good answer, but that is a very good question. So, thank you. Other questions? Yes?
How many agencies did you say you have using it today?
It's, I want to say 10 or 12 right now that have jumped on board. We just opened up the gates for people to start getting on board a few months back. There's a decent queue of another 10 to 12 more that are ready to go. And just for background, we have agencies as small as 2 people and as large as 10, 12,000. So the count of agencies can, be misleading from time to time, but the encouraging thing is a lot of our larger agencies, and particularly some of the ones with the more compelling cases for this, have been early adopters, and they've been very good partners. Part of standing up this service, and part of standing up this service was we wanted early engagement. We wanted to talk to these folks about how do you envision this thing going, right? We wanted to get their feedback, and we went through the whole service model with them multiple times, multiple iterations. We'd present it to all of them, have breakout sessions, take their feedback, come back a few weeks later and say, okay, does this look like what you want? And they, okay, we have a little more feedback. So we used an iterative process to get to this service model, which I think has helped people adopt. The biggest reason that we stood up, the biggest reason that it took us a few months to get agencies onboarding was the cost model, because most agencies weren't willing to just take it on faith that this would be affordable. No matter how many times I told them, I said, I promise you, this will be really good. You'll love it, and it's not going to cost that much. Most agencies said, well, yeah, when you get your cost model finalized, then we'll take it seriously. So it took us a little while to work through that and make sure that our cost model was viable going forward, particularly the long-term, the run, the M&O, and the out years. It took us a while to work out those kinks and be sure that everything was good to go. But as soon as we announced the rate in a CIO's forum and said, okay, doors open, we got a line immediately. So the need was definitely there. I think people were just waiting to see when, what the model would look like. Yes?
Another question, so when you're managing the server environment, are you managing the login and security models within the Tableau server for the agency? So say they have thousands of end users that want access, or are you going to help manage, this end user is not using this data, this end user is using this data, who's logging in, what they can access?
Very good question. So, and I'll answer as concisely as possible. So, from an authentication standpoint, in terms of just getting access to the application as a whole, That is driven off of our enterprise identity and enterprise Active Directory. So just getting past the front door, authenticating, you are who you say you are, welcome to the application. We're doing that at an enterprise level. We do not have a mechanism, however, at the site level to assist agencies with doing that. And this was actually one of the things that I've been talking with Tableau about that I would love to see addressed at a server level is a way, well, let's put it this way. Where it leaves an agency is in order to manage their access and their permissions, they're basically having to do it manually because we cannot go, the tool will not allow us to go site by site and connect to different sources to manage permissions and access, which I think is something, if we could get past that, our traditional model for all of the rest of our BI suite has been, we manage access and permissions off the source system. So using the ERP example, based on the roles that I have in our ERP, whatever I can see in the ERP, I can see in BI. If I can't see it in the ERP, I cannot see it in BI. And that keeps us as a BI team from having to manage permissions and access. It just bounces off the source system and allows you to see what you need to see. Right now, we do not have the ability to do that site by site, so it is, it poses a challenge for state agencies, particularly those that are dealing with privacy issues, where in the case of HIPAA, if I'm someone personally responsible for ensuring the privacy of citizens, PHI, their health info, I'm a little reluctant to have to manage permissions in two places, right? So I've got to manage all my access and to this personal data in my source system. Now I have to manage it on this Tableau site too. And it's prompting agencies to make decisions about how much sensitive or private information they want to push into the Tableau server. And that's going to be an ongoing conversation with us and our customers as well as with the folks at Tableau, because getting some help in that area where we could actually source our access and permissions site by site from an external source and not have to manually manage permissions would be a big win for agencies, but that's where we are today. Yes?
On one of the prior slides, you had a training level 1, 2, 3, or 101.
Yep.
Does your central team provide, actually deliver the training, go to the agency and deliver the training?
Yes.
And how is that actually accomplished?
Yeah, so we and our group we've done this from inception across business intelligence as well as the rest of our application portfolio. I believe very strongly that training is one of our critical success factors. So we invest in it. We have a training team. We have delivery folks. So we develop our own training content and we deliver it. Now, what we're doing in this case is we're really only offering these 3 courses because Tableau has a wealth of other training available online and other kinds of delivery mechanisms. So what we're doing is recognizing that a lot of our customers want a little more of a personalized touch, and that the use of the tool will better resonate with them when they can see their own data, or at least understand data that may be meaningful to them. So we're giving basically, we didn't invent this on the fly. I mean, we looked at Tableau training, this kind of thing, and then gave it a little bit of an Ohio twist, right? So make it a little more relevant to them, a little more personalized, hands-on, interactive, right? So beyond these first 3 training courses, though, in a lot of our other applications, we've gone much, much further into very advanced authoring and things like that, training content that we own and maintain. In this case, I don't think we're going to go that route just because of the availability of universal, Tableau training and learning mechanisms. So we'll probably stick with these 3 at least, unless users come to us and say we need more. But we're really going to encourage people to say, look, take these 3 courses, and then, the world's your oyster. Go out and pursue whatever learning you like. Yes.
Do you have any public-facing reports that show who is onboarded with you and who's in the queue to be onboarded with you?
We don't have anything publicly facing. I think if afterwards, if you'd like to talk with Pyle, I think she'd be more than happy to, provide you any info. But we don't have anything published out there right now in terms of who's on.
I mean, I'm an Ohio taxpayer, so
Yeah.
I'm paying for it, so.
Ah, cool. Well, thank
Love
you.
to see where it's at.
On a lot of levels, thank you. We appreciate your support. Any other questions? I think we're bumping up against 10 o'clock. Last one. Yes, sir.
This may have the same answer as the other one, but it seems another issue that you're going to deal with at some point is, let's say, agency A uses the federal accident reporting system. So they're trying to do some correlation between something and car accidents. Somebody else grabs a different data source, or maybe just different elements within the same source, and so you have this problem of intelligent comparisons of who's using the data properly. So that's going to be another interesting data.
Yes.
How are people going to collaborate to ensure that there's not a lot of junk analysis out there?
You know, it's going to be tricky, and it's going to come down to those two agencies to come to a common understanding in that example of what is the proper data set to look at. And in the case you're giving, right, sometimes we have data issues because of dirty or inaccurate or incomplete data. In other cases, the data is perfect, but our understanding or our perspective on what it means can be vastly different depending on where we're coming from. And so, you know, that's going to be one of those ones, again, where the experts at the agencies are going to have to work together to reach a common or a consensus understanding of how this works, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And I just don't have a better answer than that. It's going to be a learning experience, I'm sure. Okay? All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciated.